All right, welcome everybody. Today we are speaking with Marcos Rivera, the CEO of Pricing.io. We're really excited. Marcos is going to be speaking at our event in the fall at Usage Economy Summit in November in San Francisco. So maybe we get started, and Marcos, maybe you just give a introduction to yourself, your background in Pricing.io.
Absolutely. And listen, Tim, thanks for having me on. The short on me is that I'm the CEO of Pricing.io, which we're a consulting firm that helps B2B SaaS companies figure out how much to charge for their great technology. But the big confession is I'm actually not much of a consultant. I'm really an operator who learned how to price and package over 25 years. I've done about 500 engagements. I've done a lot of these things and sort of found out how do you measure and capture and exchange value with your customers. And so applying that methodology in a pretty practical, no BS way, just to make sure that we are able to, really capture the value of what you're building. And that's really the short on how I stepped into this. I'm really a product manager is where I started. Building products, figuring out how do you grow this stuff, how do you get sales to sell it, customers to buy it, all those things. And in doing that and realizing like, wait a minute, I think there's there's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of know-how that goes into how do you price. And I just fell in love with the whole craft and took a little left turn in my career. Instead of keeping going down the product route, went the pricing route.
Nice. And I come from product background myself as well. So I found my way into the marketing side of things out of the product side. So yeah, it's an interesting journey going through the product side of the business there. And I've been seeing you've got a lot of great content that you've been posting on LinkedIn around pricing strategies and things like that. And I think one of the very everybody's talking about AI. Everybody's talking about AI, and what's it's going to be in their products. And I'm wondering if you're coming across, the biggest misconception that you're finding out there when people come to monetizing it, right? And is there kind of a common thing that you keep running into when you're talking to different clients?
Yeah, I mean, AI is the talk of the town. Everybody's, mentioning it, promoting it, all these key things. And I'm seeing a lot of different flavors of monetizing AI in my line of work. And I will say, though, there are some things that folks are, I think, really missing on. Okay. And now I've seen there's experimenting going on, like anything you experiment, you try to figure out a bunch of things from ChatGPT all the way to all the other vertical focused AI companies. They're kind of trying to figure out like, how do I charge for this stuff? And what I'm noticing is that in that experimentation, you're seeing a lot of packaging mistakes, like too complex or too simple, just to try to figure out what's going on. But the biggest mistake I'm seeing is companies that are anchoring themselves on the value of time savings only, like exclusively. And one of the things I figured out early in my career is that time savings is great. And no one buys software to spend more time on something. Like the whole premise is to save time, but that's the ante. Like that's sort of the pay to play. Of course you're going to save time. Of course you are. And so what can you do beyond that? What does that save time get me as a company? Does it allow me to close more deals? Does it allow me to expand in my markets? What is that? And so I'm seeing, I think, an overemphasis on we're going to save you, X amount of hours per month with our AI. I'm like, yeah, that's great. But that just opens the doorway to another AI saying, yes, I can save you the same amount of hours and do it for cheaper. And I think it can really push price points down. And so I'd say go beyond time, right? Figure out, is there something else that you unlock with your AI? Maybe there's something they can do they could not do before, or see that they couldn't see before, and move away from just time. That's the big mistake I'm seeing.
Yeah, well, I think it's an interesting point, right? Because it's the question really comes then, right? Is it a pricing challenge, or is it a product design challenge, and really getting to the value that you're offering out of your product, and then the pricing follows that? Like, maybe it's not really just in the dollars and cents; it's really how you're addressing market.
Yeah. That resonates a lot with me being in my product background. And what excites me a lot is that AI is really forcing the sort of intertwined product and pricing paradigm. And so what I mean by that is, you have SaaS, and in the beginning, like you had sort of more on-prem software, right? And you can somewhat separate the pricing model from the product to a degree. You just charge it for access to something, and that's that. But with AI, it's really forcing these two things to connect, pricing and product. It makes me excited, given my background, but it also really forces you to deliver tangible, real value, right? And if you look at software today, it's mostly a promise of value, right? If you get onboarded and you configure it right and you use it properly and you do all this and that, you may end up getting the value promise at some point, right? But with AI, there's no room for that shit. Like, it's going to deliver the value. And if it delivers the value, what's nice about the AI and product design sort of mix is now you're able to capture more of it because the product is responsible for more of it, right? And it gets into this whole thing of attribution. We can cover that later. But my thing here is that product design and pricing design are now closer together than ever because of AI.
Well, your comments remind me. I started smiling and laughing. It's like, well, 5-minute abs. Okay, well, what if someone comes out with 4-minute abs? Because you know what I mean. Like, so it's that same kind of drive. If it's just the time that it's saving, what's the value that you're getting? So it's thinking about that whole. Well, what about 3 minutes abs? And it's just a drive to the bottom on the pricing for the value that you're getting out of your workout. So, and I think that's the key thing that the conversations that we're having. And it's not just AI oriented. It's around figuring out the value, the perceived value of what you're offering, and being able to do a direct line to the price that I'm paying for it. Right? What is the benefit that I'm getting from that? And I think that's the thing that we've been seeing a lot of challenge on seat-based licenses and these things, specifically recently, because everybody's finance department is saying, all right, things are tight right now. We need to save some cash. How much value are we getting on this amount of seats of this? Are we really getting all the value out of in what they're offering? Could we do with less? And so that direct line of what I'm paying for is the value that I'm getting is, I think, the big key underlying all this.
It is the big key. And listen, I say this because I see a lot of company pricing models. I see a lot of different ones. One of the first things I ask them is, okay, what's your value? What's the value trying to capture, right? Well, we save companies time and money, right? It's always some variation of that. I said, great. Well, how much do you save them? Well, it kind of depends on the use case and the customer. I'm like, okay, well, give me an example. Well, I think in general, I think we might be able to. As I keep pushing and digging, it becomes evident that they don't actually know how much value they're offering, they're giving, or exchanging with their customers. They're out there, and I get it. Listen, I'm not passing judgment here, right? At the end of the day, you're running a SaaS company. It's hard. You got deals, you got releases, you got marketing, you got all these things going on. And it's hard to kind of tie it back. But I think when you're really thinking of the pricing and packaging problem, if you don't understand that value component, hell yeah, it's going to be hard to price your product. Of course, you're not going to know what the right pricing model really is. And so I think that, again, that evolution, this step forward and leap with AI, I think is breaking this down and forcing you. And the last piece of this is really, if someone is going to use your product, and the big thing I'm seeing with AI now is they actually have to trust it. Okay. Now, with current SaaS software, you kind of have to trust the product, but you also have to trust yourself to use the product, to get people in there, train them, etc. But in this new world with AI, you kind of have to trust the product a little bit more. And you want to make sure that you're able to adopt the product as not just a co-pilot or assisting you in your process, but maybe even taking some of it over and doing it on your behalf, which in my mind is really hard for humans to do without some good evidence.
Yeah. And I think it gets even more challenging when you have people talking about outcome-based pricing, right? And well, if you can't describe your full value, well, how are you going to drive what your actual outcomes are that are coming out from a pricing perspective? Like we've seen challenges. I've seen very similar things with this when IoT was first launching, right? And the promise of IoT and all the things that were behind that. And it was around that value. A good example was, well, I'm pricing you, I'm monitoring temperatures of some big system from a heating perspective. And when it gets to a certain threshold, then there's problems, and I want to know about that, right? And the real value was getting those, but then those only happen once in a blue moon. So how do I structure my pricing around scenarios where I really get that valued, trusted outcome, but at the same time, I need to make money when that might not be happening? So it's a weird blend of kind of trust and outcome and value. And it's when it's coming into thought, right? Like the agentic AI, like how do you put value around that? It's a real challenge.
It's super hard. And that's a really great example on the IoT, and it resonates with me. I invested in a company that was an IoT for hydraulic systems, and would actually tell you if there's a problem before the hydraulics broke down, which saved them a ton of money in replacing hydraulics and using preventative maintenance. And when we were talking about the pricing model, they said, yeah, we want to charge, X amount of dollars. I said, why? And he goes, well, because in order for us to do to really prevent this entire cycle of replacing the hydraulic system, we're saving them like $1 million. It was like for heavy machinery. Okay. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't take a huge chunk of that value. They're the ones that actually have to go and do the work and replace it and all that. You're sort of just giving them the indicator. I also see this with supply chain software, or some other software that tries to identify money savings in accounting and procurement and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, we can take a big fat chunk of that and claim it as the value we provided. I'm like, you're a few degrees away from actually realizing, the value on the other end. And so I always say, if you're looking at outcome-based pricing, wonderful, super aligned. People get it. They get the outcome, they pay. That makes a lot of sense. But what doesn't make a lot of sense is claiming the full value for something that you're not fully responsible for. And that's the tricky piece. And so companies that are trying to do that, you want to make sure you step through the degrees in which, how much are you influencing that final outcome?
It's interesting. Well, just let me tax you 50% on the value that you just pulled out of my system because it saved you all that money.
One way to kill adoption. That's one way to kill it.
So it's half as bad for you, right?
It doesn't work that way, right? Like, listen, like a beautiful example of doing it right was these guys over at Intercom, like Finn, like that whole AI agent that helps kind of resolve calls, right? Like the dang thing gets on and actually resolves the call to the end, right? The customer hangs up, they get the resolution, they're good. There's no arguing, like, yeah, the thing did it, so you should pay it, give it its due. But don't. If you just guide another agent, then that's a different paradigm. The agent is still doing the work. And so in my view, if it's super clear that your product is the one responsible for doing it, and there's no argument, there's a very direct line, like you said earlier, then I think you can attempt an outcome-based price. And the point of that is you want to do it such that you want to provide economies of scale to use you even more. Don't try to take and scrape every single dollar off the table on the first few instances, because I think the real win is gaining scale and then allowing them to ask, well, what else can you help me with, right? Because now you sort of went over that trust hump.
Yeah, and so I guess maybe there's a few examples that you've come across that you're like, look, you know what? I think these guys are really getting it right. I think the way that they're going to market, because it's not just pricing, it's their value going to market and the pricing that's along with that, right? That gives you that perceived value. Like, do you have some that you run into, you're just like, these guys have got it, right? I think they've got something here.
I got a couple, man. Well, of course, I think Finn and those guys at Intercom are doing a pretty nice job. I compared them to Zendesk and some of the other solutions that are out there, and I think they have the smartest model compared to all of them. They have a version where they just, the first 10 calls are on us. I mean, how sweet is that, right? I mean, the first 10 are on us, gives you that opportunity to tease and then please and then seize, right? It's that old tactic. It works beautifully. So I think they got that piece right. Another one I really like is when I think about Anthropic versus ChatGPT and some of the ways that they've approached their pricing. I like the way Anthropic has a really smart free plan that catapults you into the $20 a month. And they all kind of start around that $20 a month range. They all kind of test it around that number. And then from there, what they've done is they give you a lot more access to their reasoning models and the capabilities, some of the latest ones, and they start capping usage at certain points. And I know this because I was using it and it freaking made me upgrade and buy more. And I was like, all right, that's a good one, guys. But they capped it at a stage where I really wanted to go further and deeper into the reasoning. And so I had to upgrade to get a little more usage out of it. So I think they're smart. Third one, I actually really like what Cursor's doing. Like those guys are blowing up like crazy, but their free and entry plan, they reduce friction so damn much to use it. And think about what they're serving, right? Developers, like these guys don't trust anybody, right? They want to code everything themselves. They want to build it themselves. But man, it is, I think that the key is that transparency in the thinking when Cursor's telling you like the logic it went through in its code and all that stuff. I think that that's just a winner in the product design and the pricing mixed together. So Cursor, yeah, and Anthropic with Claude is doing a really good job.
Well, and I think like there's so many different varieties out there. And I think one of the challenges is there's people like, okay, well, I want to be a leader and try a new pricing model out and see if it's succeeding for me, or those over there just did that and I need to do a fast follow to be able to connect. So my flexibility around that and my pricing around it. And you mentioned, the usage side of things. And, I always have the fun story of us internally, right? I was starting to do some stuff with ChatGPT and I needed to process about 2,000 different records where I was going to do some research on some different companies. Written my scripts, written my prompts, it's all going to be going in there. And I take a look at the pricing and it's token based, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'm talking to the finance department. Well, how much budget do you need on the credit card to be able to run this through? And I'm like, well, this is going to save me like days of work. I think $2,000. We'll put it on the credit and we see what runs through. Ran everything that went through. That's $1 of credit, right? $1 a thing. Went through, did all the stuff, waited for the bill to come the next, next billing period, and it was like 27 cents. And I'm like, 27 cents. Like I can't put tokens. So I'm curious on what you're seeing out there around, consumption and usage models that give that visibility and that clarity versus those that I just don't know what I'm going to use out of it, right? And just some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so usage is going to continue to increase with AI. I think there's no way around it. And for me, the type of usage and the amount of usage matters. Okay, like I'll give you an old think about Netflix, for example, right? If they were to charge you for every minute of viewing time or every show you watched, you sort of change your behavior a little bit. Okay, and so when you get too granular on the usage, then people pay attention to it, is what I'm saying. And if people are paying attention to it, if that's the way you want to price, you have to make it easy for them to predict and understand how much, what that means to them in their goals and their objectives and in what they're trying to achieve. And so, so two ways to think about it. What I'm seeing most common is a bit of a hybrid approach where it's like, hey, look, you get this amount of usage for this flat amount of money. And then in the bottom, it says, here's what this means. This amount of usage, this many credits or this many tokens means you can do 50 prompts of, 15 characters or 15 words each, or you can do this, or you can do that, or it'll take you this far. And I think just contextualizing the amount makes it a lot easier for someone to understand, like, oh, okay, that's what that means. And then the flat amount sort of makes you understand, okay, here's what I would pay to get this. And then it's not just a flat amount, but what happens if? And that's the thing that the human mind directly goes to is, well, what happens if I use more? Or what happens if I use less? And where does this go? And so in your pricing, you can put in your FAQs or whatever, you got to make it easy to understand what happens if you exceed that amount. And listen, I buy things just like everybody else, and I want to know what happens if I go over my limit. If you make that a very clear understanding by either showing the scale or showing what the next tier is, and what that scenario looks like, I think people start becoming a little bit more, a little bit more familiar and are able to do that. So my guess is a hybrid of a flat up to a limit and what happens afterwards is one. And second, if you really want to go down this credit variable or token path, what the hell does that even mean? And try to put some real life scenarios that your ICP would want to do with your product and call it out. That's what I would do.
Right. And that was my challenge. I'm like, I'm reading the definition of a token, and then the token takes me to another page that gives me a definition of it could be this, or it could be that, or it might be this, or it might be that, right? And I'm like, well, I don't know what that will mean. Is that the amount of text? Well, no, it's not just the amount of text. It could just be the verbiage in the phrases, or it goes to this model, or it goes to that model, right? So, and I think that keeping it simple is the biggest thing, right? And I think a lot of companies struggle with, well, how do I keep it simple when I have got complex infrastructure costs? That's right. The backing behind this AI, one model can be more expensive and take way more processing power, more knowledge, and it has been more expensive for me to build than the other. And so, trying to keep it simple is difficult, right?
It is. And complexity sort of helps. Here's the thing. Complexity starts opening the door to like precision. Well, this scenario and that scenario. What about this? And what about that? Nobody cares. At the end of the day, you want to go 80-20 and just give them, people think in orders of magnitude. There was an old psychology study when someone asked, how much are you willing to pay for a slice of pizza? All right. I'm not going to tell you I'm willing to pay $4.22 for a slice of pizza. Nobody freaking says that. It's more like, am I going to pay $5, $10, $2, right? And it's magnitudes. And so when you're trying to explain something complex in a model, try to just keep it easy, 80-20. You're not going to cover every single angle and every single use case. The big ones matter. Cover those, make it easy, and start there. And it'll just make a tremendous difference.
And I think one of the different types of pricing methodologies that we've been seeing that have been working in an environment where there's unknowns of how much I'm going to use of X, Y, or Z is much more kind of like the Amazon model, right? It's like a consumption drawdown, because at the end of the day, I know that my budget is I'm going to spend $5,000 with Marcos this month. And that's what my budget is. I don't know how much of this or how much of that service or that model or this model that I'm going to use, but I know that I'm going to spend my $5,000 budget. So I can have all those things into a pool and then just draw down on each of the different prices that might be for those different things until I reach my 75% of my threshold. And it sends me a notification. Hey, you're using your stuff up pretty quickly, either top up or slow your roll, right? So those ones we've been seeing have been, because again, it's that certainty that I know what I'm going to spend and it's got safeguards on me so that I don't go over.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of drawdowns and top-ups. I think they make a lot of sense. Even, my wife has, one of those memberships where they, you get facials and massages and all that kind of stuff. And she has a credit bank. And then whenever she gets something done, it just draws down. And then when she's ready, she tops it back up and draws down. And the beauty of that is you could also drive different incentives while that's happening, right? If you really understand the usage patterns, if they're a little slow in their draw, you can say, hey, 2-for-1 special, or facials are half off, or you get twice as many with the same amount of credits, and you sort of drive behavior using that. And Snowflake's another great example of using committed usage and drawing it down and then bringing it back up. So for me, those have worked really nicely in those scenarios. I'm a fan.
Yeah, and so you mentioned there about the visibility into the data, right? And I'm curious, there's a lot of push behind product-led growth, especially in the startup space and different, well, not even just startup, but in a lot of different areas, right? And that there's visibility into how people were using your product to be able to help you grow that and define where you're going. But now AI and these agents, you actually have human interaction, and you can see how and what data is flowing back and forth in those different types of conversations. I'm curious on if you're seeing a different way in how using AI is starting to shape kind of the PLG view of things.
I think there's an interesting thing around PLG and paywalls in AI. Okay. So when you think about the PLG motion, right, the premise is very simple, right? You let them taste it, get some value, and then let the product kind of do the selling for you and kind of leads you in there. But when AI is coming in as something that, again, is trying to take over something, right? Ultimately, and that takeover could also be even taking over as your partner in crime or your co-pilot, right? Is in the product-led space, reducing friction is the number one thing you want to do into getting adoption. And so with AI, how do you reduce friction enough to get the trust up without losing your shorts on the cost? That is the big equation at the end of it, because in SaaS today, you can give away shit all day long, right? It's your your economics are going to be the same, right, as from a cost perspective, but it's a little bit different with AI. So you have to find like this really sweet spot of when there's going to be an aha moment and the trust is happening, and then an ease into the paid plans. And again, I cited earlier Anthropic doing a nice job of this. Perplexity AI, another company, does a really nice job of this too in free, and it kind of eases you into this plan, and then you can scale from there. So for me, it's not about a paywall on features. I think you want them to go in and use that. And so I think AI is forcing a little more exploratory usage so you can build familiarity and trust to get into the paid versus a feature gate like the PLG models of the past.
Right. So it's using it as an accelerator, right? But at the same point, trying not to be Microsoft Clippy, that is pulling them over here. Well, would you like me to do this? Well, how about we try this different area of the software, right? So it needs to understand how they're using it to make smart suggestions and how to get them in those other areas.
That's right. The big advantage of AI with usage or premiums or PLG motions is time. And if you can get them to use it over a period of time to get that trust and to moving forward, how do you manage that versus usage on a feature level? And when they want this feature, they need to unlock it. I think it's really getting them a path to want to use you and not go back to the old way.
Okay. So with everybody and their brother hanging AI on the side of their business at the moment, what are you seeing from the investment community and people looking to be able to get behind companies? Like, what are the signals? What are the things that they're looking for? Going, this is someone that hasn't figured out their value yet, or here's somebody that's got it down pat. Like, what are the types of things that they're looking for from an investment standpoint?
Yeah, there's a hot topic in the investment community. So I talk to all sorts of VCs and PEs all the time. Based on my Vista background, I met a lot of them, so I know quite a few. But the big thing that's coming up in these conversations is, how do you tell good AI from bad AI? And what I mean by that, there was a recent news report of a company getting sued for claiming their product had AI. And it was actually a bunch of, low labor, folks doing it in the background, hamsters in the wheels kind of thing, running, and it wasn't really AI. And so they got duped. And one of the big things you want to be careful about is the AI scalable and actually going to result in the growth that they're thinking? So let me take a few steps back here, because there was a study, I read this in Kyle Poyer's magazine or newsletter, Growth Unhinged. Good stuff if you haven't read it. And he did a study with another company, and they talked about the label of AI and what's it worth. And companies, if you remember, were starting to put AI all over their websites and all over the material. But what's happening is now, especially with some of the hallucinations that have gone on and some of the false promises, is that I think folks are getting a little more skeptical. They want to make sure it works before it really works. And so the label actually did not increase willingness to pay in that study. It left it flat. In some cases, even went down. It's better to hone in on the outcome you're trying to achieve. Now, how does this tie back to investors? If you're looking at a product in your potential investment stage, most investment right now in the AI space has been in Series D. So larger investment sums, and they've mostly been concentrated around the OpenAIs, Anthropics, Perplexities, those bigger guys, right? And there's a long tail that comes after that. Here's the thing: when it comes to investing, and I talk to investors, the first thing they wonder is like, well, man, we're not going to get the same old happy 90, 88% margins that we have in SaaS. And, the game is now different. And what I've been talking to them about is investors looking at, the same old ARR and retention metrics now have to change the metrics they're looking for in AI. Right now, AI is really about not just recurring revenue, but reoccurring revenue, because there's a lack of predictability in how much they're going to adopt the AI and have it influence their organization, what use cases they're going to allow to take over. Also, a little bit of a twist is how the company can enable the AI adoption, right? Now, remember, in the SaaS world, I'm just going to say it out loud. Professional services was kind of a redheaded stepchild. I was like, okay, professional services, this low margin shit, I don't want any of that. Try to keep that to a minimum. We want all this beautiful, recurring, SaaS-y, high margin stuff. But in the AI world, like having really high expertise, smart, focused services to help unlock the AI even more so is becoming another piece of what investors are looking for. They want to know that you have the ability to scale and create adoption curves that can drive the revenue growth. And the biggest things that are making these multiples so crazy, have you seen some of these 50x and 70x multiples, is you got a large TAM potential and you have a large or a high ability to extract value. If you have those two things with the ability to scale, that's a pretty exciting business, right? And so from an investor perspective, those are the key elements: the reoccurring piece, the enabling service piece, the adoption curve piece, scalability, maturity of the models, all those things they're looking at.
Yeah, that's good. Good. I mean, I think that's the tricky part, right? Especially if everything is based off how much it's being used. If I can't get you on the adoption curve and really using it a whole lot, then I'm not going to be driving value out of it.
No, you don't want to end up like, so Salesforce, like think about this, guys, right? So they came out with this bold statement, right? Where Mark came out and said, yeah, we're going to switch everything from user-based pricing to, this whole agent force and agentic and pricing by this and by that. And when I was reading some of the updates from that, my initial reaction was, oh shit, okay, these guys are getting bold. They feel that there could be some existential threats going on their way. People are talking smack that their model's dead. So they shifted. But here's the thing, it didn't take off like they thought it would, right? And the thing is, right, you got to remember the enterprise animal is a risk-averse animal. Like they're not going to change all this shit overnight. And so what they're finding is that some companies were adopting, agents and AI and things like that. And then they go, oh, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure. The second your AI does something wrong, kaboom. All right. You have to be super careful, right? And so in the end, I think when investors sees a very clear path to adoption and the ability and evidence that you're able to then go into a company, solve a problem, and expand from that point, that's a really exciting business.
Yeah. Well, I know we keep finding more and more. It's like the time savings, the one main thing, right? But like you said, you got to find something more than just the drive to the bottom of saving time in there. I had read a quote the other day, was one of the biggest mistakes about thinking about AI is that it's a new feature instead of thinking of it as it's a new operating system, right? And so you need to think more about how it's actually going to impact and what you're going to do versus just, it's like, how can I drive to the bottom of the amount of time that's going to be used on that one? So it was an interesting quote there. So I'm curious, you've got a bunch of research ahead of you that you're working through. I'm curious on what are the types of topics and things that you're looking to dig in over the next, for the rest of this year.
Yeah, I think a big one. So where AI is and monetizing AI is going, like I'm actually seeing it impact the sales cycle, how we sell and how we buy. And one thing that has come up it comes in and out of vogue, but is the transparency of how much do you actually reveal about your pricing model, even, in your sales materials, on your website, things like that. It's been a topic, comes up and down all the time. And I think AI is really going to force transparency. Like if I had to give you a bold prediction, like I think that shit's going to change 180. I think companies are going to realize that, oh, wait a minute, I need to make sure that an AI that's analyzing my product because someone is searching for a solution to their problem using AI, and now AI is evaluating me, which is maybe another AI company, right? So you got AI searching for AI, evaluating AI, right? You have all these layers. If you don't actually publish the right amount of right information, some AI is going to take liberties and guess and fill in the blanks for you. We've already seen them do that. And so I think that's going to force a lot of companies to be more transparent in their pricing model and what they charge for and how they charge. So that way it keeps, it keeps the information accurate that's getting collected out there. Right? There's no hiding anymore, right? It's everywhere. So I think that's going to be the big push from an AI front. I also think from what I'll be talking about, just to give you a little bit of a glimpse, is the how to avoid losing your pricing power with AI. 'Cause going back to that time savings comment, I have a lot more to say about that. And I have some things that I've been seeing that I felt like, man, if companies kind of knew these tips or tricks or these angles, they'll be able to capture a bit more or keep more of that pricing power in their journey. And that should help them monetize a lot more effectively.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great teaser to end the podcast on. Stay tuned for this fall and come to listen to you speak in San Francisco. So fantastic. Thank you so much, Marcos, for joining us. Love having these conversations and can't wait to continue it this fall in San Francisco.
No, it was a lot of fun, man. You already got me started. You know I get passionate about these things. So,
That's good. That's good. It comes through. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm excited. I look forward to November, man. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.